Anyway, that Darwinists walk a decidedly lower moral ground than the forces of ID. As one interviewee, David Berlinski, notes, Darwinism is not a sufficient condition for a phenomenon like Nazism, but I think it's certainly a necessary one. By the use of this type of negative connotation, Stein successfully aligns himself with some of the most misleading of protagonists, the big tobacco lobby of the 1970s and 80s. Through the use of their planned "Doubt is Our Product" campaign, they were able to stave off increased regulations of their product for years. The usual techniques of invoking doubt, such as demanding ever greater precision, questioning the physical methods, and raising alternate, however slight, possibilities, are in full display during this section of the film. These are the same methods used by the climate change naysayers and any other movements with a personal axe to grind, whether they be valid or not. There is no doubt that the Holocaust during the Nazi occupation of Europe was one of the most inhumane and tragic periods of the 20th century. But to try and align this with evolutionary theory is preposterous. It is the equivalent of saying owning a chainsaw makes you a serial killer. Anyone familiar with the cult horror film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, knows that you don't accuse the chainsaw. It is a tool, nothing more, nothing less. Should we ban the sale of chainsaws? Incarcerate the manufacturers and sellers of this heinous piece of machinery? Of course not. Maybe the connection is with men named Jason, especially ones who may wear a goalie mask. No matter the parallel, it is evident that there is some questionable logic at work here. On a more sober note, speaking of World War II and higher moral ground, can the Allied forces, consisting of Britain, France, Canada, and the United States, claim any such solid footing after unleashing the most horrific of weapons, the atomic bomb, on Japan? In 2 separate airstrikes, 3 days apart, the lives of 140,000 civilians, men, women, children, and grandparents, were ended with no regard to their activity in the war effort other than being Japanese. Indiscriminate may be too generous a descriptor to the breadth of the killing in this circumstance. Also, let us not forget the track record of religious differences which have led to massive loss of life and, more importantly, human rights and dignity during the recent history of mankind. We don't even have to look at anything so ancient as the Crusades. Let's consider Darfur, Armenia, Afghanistan, Serbia and Bosnia-Herzegovina, the Israeli-Palestinian situation, Lebanon, and Northern Ireland, the splitting of India and Pakistan, China and Tibet. Everywhere you look, ideological differences, when introduced into the political makeup of diverse regions, create differences which ultimately seem to be settled by violence. Do we really want to introduce this kind of ideological tinder into the scientific world? Absolutely not. There is more than enough work to do without adding window dressings such as this. Stein then moves off to Britain to visit Down House, once the home and now a museum of Charles Darwin. There he quotes from Darwin's later work, The Descent of Man, making reference to the phrase, "Hardly anyone is so ignorant as to breed his worst animals to improve his herd." Coming from an agricultural background, and my family has been involved in agriculture for generations, I thought, at last, we're going to hear some good common sense and reality from this film. During my lifetime, I have seen this planet triple its population. I have also been witness to and a participant in the Green Revolution, which has allowed food production to keep pace with this staggering population increase. It is with none other than the knowledge, the mechanism of evolutionary theory that the biologists working in the plant and animal sciences and the chemists working in pest management and fertility have been able to keep pace in agricultural production, thereby allowing the world to still feed itself. For better or for worse, the use of chemicals, high energy input, and monoculture have kept food and textile staples on the tables and the backs of the people of this world. Imagine my surprise then that, rather than documenting proper science history, isn't this supposed to be a documentary? Stein veers off course, making the careless comment that science isn't the hobby of rich aristocrats anymore. I knew that Darwin's family was English gentry, but apparently he has been elevated to the level of aristocrat. This leads into an interview with Richard Dawkins, a prominent author and an atheist. As amusing as the interview is, to say that Stein was badgering the witness would be a kindness. His line of questioning during the interview bordered somewhere between infantile and moronic. At the center of his questioning, though, is the meat of the whole question in Expelled. Although nearly all scientists questioned during the film, both pro and con intelligent design, acknowledged that change over time, or evolution, was apparent in the natural history of the Earth, the real question seems to be, where did life begin? As Stein asks, how can you have a theory of life if you don't have a theory of how life began? I would love to ask Stein this very question myself, and then listen closely as he realized how inadequate his answer sounded. The fact is, there is no answer to this question yet. No one knows. There is no body of work, no accumulation of data, no overwhelming evidence to indicate how the spark of life began.